Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris from the National Parents Organization, and today I have Gene C. Colman. He's one of the founders of the Canadian Equal Parenting Council. He's also a co-founder of the Lawyers for Shared Parenting in Canada, and he's also a Toronto family lawyer. And how are you doing today, Gene?
Very good, thank you. Just turning off all my phones.
So you recently had some movement up there in Canada. There was an article that came out, and that article was CBA's surprise of embrace. I get that messed up again.
Let me help you. CBA, the article was in legalmatterscanada.ca,
Okay.
and it's by an independent journalist. And the article is CBA's apostrophe S surprise embrace of rebuttable presumption is welcomed.
That is a mouthful. So tell us a little bit about that, and you had a lot to do with that. So what's going on up there in Canada?
Well, we're very polite in Canada, okay? um, so I wrote a polite article, actually, a polite blog post, actually, and then there was a article by Legal Matters Canada, which is a website with Canadian legal articles prepared by a number of journalists. And the National Parents Organization picked this up. But please do not get overly excited. Because while the Canadian Bar Association, which is comparable to the American Bar Association in your neck of the woods, a very large-based organization of lawyers in Canada, well, they welcomed the rebuttable presumption. It's not in the area of child custody cases, child parenting cases. It's in the area of child support. So put that one in your hat or underneath your seat.
Well, any movement on this stuff, I think, is a move in the right direction, because you certainly can't make large jumps when you're changing the legal system. So, but so up in Canada, basically is this law now, or are we still talking about it?
Well, no, it's not. The rebuttable presumption that the Canadian Bar Association was advocating, they're only advocating. They wrote a letter to the Minister of Justice. And in that letter, they said we should change the federal child support guidelines so that when you have an equal shared parenting situation, which we in Canada, in the guidelines, define as at least 40% of residential time, 39 doesn't count in the official standings, at least 40%. When you have that, then when you are dealing with child support, you don't just look at the 40% payors or person's income, you look at the 60% as well. Or if it's 50-50, you look at both. And what the law currently holds under Section 9 of the Federal Child Support Guidelines, which, by the way, are mirrored by the provinces and their guidelines, except for Quebec. Quebec is the only province that has it right, but that's another topic. So the other provinces and territories have very similar legislation as the feds do. Because in Canada, we have crazy family law jurisdiction. It's both federal and provincial. All right, so what you do is you have sections 9A, B, and C. And section 9A says we look at parent A's income, number of children, amount of your income. That's how much you pay for your table child support. Very similar somewhat to the States. Then we take, also as part of section 9A, we take parent B. What's your income? How many kids? Okay, you would pay that. And lo and behold, one would think, okay, so the one with the greater income pays to the lesser one. Not quite that simple. Getting the Complicated Income Tax Act. Your American viewers don't want to hear about that. But for all intents and purposes, so one parent has an obligation for $900 based on their income. The other parent has an obligation for $700. So the parent with the $900 pays the $700 one $200. Sounds fair because they have 50% of the time, right? Then 9B and C go on to unduly complicate the matter. And I won't read 9B and C because I'm not giving a lecture to lawyers. I'm giving a talk to lay people. And 9B and C is incredibly complicated. So what has happened in the trenches, so to speak, is that we are applying, both lawyers and judges for the most part, are applying Section 9A, the set-off amount, and they're largely ignoring 9B and C. If you go to do your calculations under 9B and C, if you're a lawyer, you're going to have a tough time figuring it out. And if you're a lay person, forget it. So to their credit, the Canadian Bar Association came along, wrote a letter to the Minister of Justice, Federal Minister of Justice. We should change this, make it just 9A. But here's where our people that are watching this, this interview are interested. Because the language that they used was rebuttable presumption. They said the set-off amount will be the rebuttable presumption. Oh, those sound like very good words because that's the thrust of the, for example, of the Kentucky legislation in regards to parenting. And it's what many advocates in the field of parenting of children have been saying. We should have a rebuttable presumption for equal shared parenting. All things being equal, the parents, the child, not the parent should be entitled, the child should be entitled to approximately equal time with each parent and equal decision making. So we've been talking about this rebuttable presumption and what circumstances would the presumption be rebutted with respect to equal shared parenting. And the literature in Canada, the literature in the States is pretty much the same. So those of you that are listening and have some familiarity with the subject know all about that. And certainly in the talks and my writings and representations that I and others have made to Parliament, we talk about the rebuttable presumption and what factors and why it's so good and why so many social sciences like Fabricius and Nielsen, you know, and you name them, have proven in the social sciences that generally speaking, it's better for kids. So we should have a presumption. Is it good for everybody? No, of course not. That's why you make it a rebuttable presumption. But then the onus, if you want to rebut it, the onus is on you. And in jurisdictions where you effectively have a rebuttable presumption, whether by legislation or by case law, we find we have less litigation because what do you know? People negotiate in the shadow of the law. And if they realize it's an uphill battle to shake that 50-50, they're not going to waste their money. So our arguments of rebuttable presumption, I guess, struck a chord, maybe coincidentally, with the Canadian Bar Association. And I'm just looking at the article with that I have here, the letters referred to.
And I'm going to bring that article up here on the screen.
The article, that's a legal, you might bring me the legal matters article up, which is fine. The one I'm looking at right now is the one, is a notice I got May 19th, 2021 from the Canadian Bar Association. And I was reading this and oh my goodness. Anyway, so you'll see why. So this is a article in the Canadian Bar Association newsletter. And referring to the letter that the family law section sent to the Minister of Justice, they talk about fairness, flexibility. They say the difficulty and expense inherent in meeting the requirements of sections 9B and C. Remember I talked about those? 9B
right,
is
yep.
The guidelines, fails to fulfill the guidelines, objectives of ensuring that children continue to benefit from the means of both their parents. Listen to this one. Increases conflict and tension between the parents. Sound familiar?
Oh, absolutely.
Reduces the objectivity of child support calculations. And here's the clincher, folks. And is detrimental to an efficient court process. All the things that we advocates for equal shared parenting have been saying. They say, well, if you change the child support guidelines, look at these benefits we're going to have to the system. And there's more. Okay, this is a quote from the CBA letter. Quote, this presumption would provide guidance to parents and courts, increase predictability, consistency, and court efficiency, and reduce parental conflict. Reduce parental conflict by making child support calculations more objective. And skipping down a bit, still quoting, a presumption would it also increase access to justice by increasing the simplicity, predictability, and objectivity of calculations of child support in situations of shared care. So this sort, and there's more of this, so this sort of language is the exact language that I've been using, and I'm not alone. My colleague Brian Ludmer also done fantastic work in the alienation field. Other people and lawyers for shared parenting, which I co-founded with Brian. Many of us, academics, Linda Nielsen, Bill Fabricius, and others have been making these arguments and saying, let's reduce conflict, let's have predictability, but let's make the presumption of ESP rebuttable. Now, in response, here it comes, guys. In response to our arguments, the Canadian Bar Association has written and has made submissions to Parliament, just like we did when Bill C5, Federal Bill C560 was before Parliament a few years ago. They ultimately passed amendments to the Divorce Act. They did not implement equal shared parenting. But their arguments were, and have been for years, that in family law, you have to tailor-make your order or your disposition to the particular children involved. We have to meet those children's needs. And therefore, you should have no presumptions. Presumptions in family law, they tell us, are very bad. And of course, they say that we that advocate for ESP in public say that the father's rights advocates, the father's rights people. Well, that may be the colloquial way to call us, but we are family rights. We are children's rights. I mean, yes, I care about father's rights, but I care equally about mother's rights. But most of all, I care about children's rights. And I think I speak for many people that are in the National Parents Organization and other organizations that are advocating for equal shared parenting. But the arguments that they threw at us, not scientifically based, not based on social science. And one has to wonder if maybe it's based on the money that lawyers and others in the divorce industry make from conflict. Do I think that my colleagues are trying to incite conflict in order to earn more money? Or that our psychologists or social workers that work in the field are trying to incite conflict to earn more money? No, I don't think so. Because we're talking about by and large good people who do want to help. But is that maybe a subconscious effect of conflict? In a highly conflictual case, there's no presumption of equal shared parenting, and boy, they battle it out. And we kill lots of trees for the paper that we create in our affidavits and our briefs, etc. We could get rid of that. Now, I'm speaking here against my own economic self-interest because I am part of that system, and I admit it. I do work within the system, but I also do the advocacy work that I do to try and change the law, because that is best for kids. And the Bar Association now wants a rebuttable presumption of set-off under Section 9 of the guidelines.
I
And
think it's
so,
really interesting here. I mean, to sum it up, really, the bar in Canada has recognized that the law currently is too complex and hard to deal with, right? So, in
and don't
order to
forget, and incites conflict.
and incites conflict. And in order to fix that, they are suggesting that rebuttable presumption here will help things to a great extent, and by ignoring or by getting rid of the provisions that make things complicated. And I think we see this internationally. I know here in the States, there's several states where the child support formula is overly complicated, and it tries to account for every little tiny situation, and effectively you create a system where you have to be an expert, or you have to pay an expert to really interpret what the real meaning is, right? And so the Canadian Bar Association is now saying, hey, maybe we've gone too far. Maybe we need to simplify this a little bit. And there's some intrinsic benefits to that, to where maybe rebuttable presumption will be more of a standard in Canada here in the future.
Well, we agree with Canadian Bar Association, and George Peascore, a name that's probably known to many of the people that are active in the movement. George Peascore, on behalf of Lawyers for Shared Parenting, Canadian Equal Parenting Council, and other organizations that are involved here in Canada, he put together a letter. We had a little bit of an edit, but it was basically George's letter on behalf of the organizations, and we sent to the Minister of Justice, saying, yes, we support the Canadian Bar Association. Now, we proposed a slight adjustment to what they had proposed, but nothing different in principle. And it was sweet. It was sweet to say that we support them, because if the Minister of Justice listens to the Bar Association, which the Minister of Justice often does, it's a very influential organization, and if they go, if the government, well, an election is coming up, it hasn't been called yet, so, but if a future government will make the amendment that the Canadian Bar Association is calling for, and I think everyone will support that amendment, and they'll put in the words rebuttable presumption, that is going to give the equal shared parenting movement in Canada, and indeed around the world, a great argument. There will be speeches in Parliament making the arguments that the Canadian Bar Association made in their letter, and that people will talk about, and we will say, and we will be in the front rows cheering them on. Well, do we have an agenda? We sure do. We want what's best for kids.
So, loop the audience in here a little bit, because in the United States, where National Parents Organization is based, we have 50 collective governments essentially that each have to pass their own laws. You have provinces in Canada and federal government. How does it work there? Is there going to be a change at the federal level? Is there need to be a change at each provincial level? What is it really going to take to get shared parenting, across the nation in Canada?
It's going to take an amendment to the Federal Divorce Act to start. And I have empirical proof of that. In our Constitution, the federal government has power over divorce and any issues arising from divorce. So where parties are married and they're going to get separated, divorced, the Federal Divorce Act applies to the status, be married or unmarried, to spousal support, and to child support, and to parenting. We don't call it custody and access anymore in Canada. We call it parenting time, parenting responsibility, which is a step forward. In the social science literature, everyone agrees on that. And I've found now, and that came into effect on March 1st, just passed. And for what I've seen, it's having a good effect. It's having a good effect. So that's your federal jurisdiction. Under our Constitution, the provinces have jurisdiction over property and civil rights. And therefore, on dissolution of marriage, it's the province that legislates in respect to how you divide up property or the value of property, etc. But some people are not married. Some people never live together. Some people do live together. But where we don't have the issue of marriage or divorce, then the province steps in there and legislates with respect to all those issues that I just enumerated. The feds legislate in. And where you have an operational conflict between the feds and the provinces, it's the federal statute that trumps the provincial statute. I do not intend any pun there at all. It's the federal statute is rules, and that's what it is. So to get change in regards, the change that we want for equal shared parenting, a presumption of equal shared parenting, practically speaking, a province could go out on its own and legislate that, but it would not apply to people that are in divorce case. It would just apply to the others. But what happened now when the feds changed the Divorce Act through Bill C-560, the provinces and territories followed suit. So in Ontario, we have amendments to our Ontario Family Law Act dealing with support and property, and to Ontario Children's Law Reform Act dealing with parenting, that by and large mirror the federal changes. Because the provinces didn't want to be on a separate tack from the feds. And the feds, to their credit, did thoroughly study the matter. I mean, people that had presentations to make to the Justice Committee, like myself and Brian Lidmer and others, we made our submissions. Canadian Bar Association certainly made its submissions, and the committee listened, and I could see they were listening and they were asking good questions. You know, they did their job. They just happened not to agree with Gene Colman and others, and that's okay. That's life. But that was just one lost battle. But I'll tell you where we won. We won in public opinion, because public opinion in Canada, in the States, is hugely in favor of a rebuttable presumption for equal shared parenting. Hugely in favor. I think the numbers are like 75, 80% and more in some areas. And it doesn't matter if you're a liberal, you're a conservative, you're a Republican, you're a Democrat. The support for the concept is very strong in the public. In Kentucky, when they brought in the changes, first for interim orders and then to final orders, the legislators that supported this bill in Kentucky, they got reelected. Those that opposed it did not get reelected. I'm sure it's not the only issue, but you know, you've got a great empirical example of the attitude that people have. And then when we were, in the bill C-560, when it came out, it was a government bill, and it came out, there was no presumption of equal shared parenting. But what was everybody talking about? Equal shared parenting. It was amazing. Like it absolutely blew me away. And that, even though we didn't get that amendment made in the act, I'm very encouraged by the reaction. They doth protest too much, and if someone is protesting, when the Parliamentary Justice Committee is considering this piece of legislation, and that's what everyone's talking about, you know we're onto something.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How can people get involved? Is there effort that you need from the people? Is there volunteer effort that you need from folks to help convince Parliament to to make this change? What can people do in Canada?
Well, in Canada, let's talk about the state. You didn't ask about the state. Talk about the states. Let's put a plug in for your organization. They can join the National Parents Organization, and they can make a charitable donation to the NPO. So you can go to the National Parents Organization website. You can make a donation. I think you can join. I don't know if you have to be a member of a sub-organization or if you can join directly. I don't know the details, but I certainly know you can make a donation. So that's in the States, which is where most of your listeners are. Let me put that. Canada, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know if the Canadian Equal Parenting Council website is back up. I think it's cepc.org or .ca. I'm sorry, I haven't been to the, I know the website was down for a while. I know they're working at getting it back up. But I do know that in order to be a member of Canadian Equal Parenting Council, it's an umbrella organization, and it consists of various constituent organizations. So I think the best thing is look on the internet, type in Canada, Google Canada parenting organizations, Canada equal parenting, and see what groups come up in your area. I know there is one very active organization in the Toronto area called Fathers Are Capable Too. There's another organization, very, very important organization in the Toronto area and the various other areas in the province and in other provinces, in Alberta and BC in particular, called the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. Canadian Centre for Men and Families. If you Google that, you will get their website. They take donations. Now, that organization tackles the broad spectrum of interests and issues that affect families, such as, for example, violence against men. In Toronto, a few months ago, we've just opened a shelter for men and families, men that are abused and have nowhere to go, and now they've got a place. They take their kids themselves and get counseling and take stock and start to put their lives together. Of course, the women's shelters, thank God we have those. They're all over the country, very well funded. And this shelter also received government funding, and I want to say, and received a lot of help from women's shelters. A lot of help, a lot of guidance. I'm proud to sit on the advisory board of that organization as well. So, I mean, that is the best place to go. I mean, if you have an interest particularly in education for men and boys, for example, and that organization deals with education issues. They deal with the legal issues, and they are a big supporter, of course, of a rebuttable presumption before share parenting. That is a very, very good organization. They run good programs. They run counseling for families and for guys. So there are various organizations around that are doing fantastic work in Canada. Some more active in some areas than others.
And we'll certainly put all those links in the notes for this on YouTube or on the podcast. So you'll be able to go to all those organizations. I did find a website for the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. There's also a website for the Canadian Equal Parenting Council that's
good.
up. And there's a Facebook page for the Canadian Equal Parenting Council. So we'll put links to all of those on the show notes for this. And
yes, there's a Facebook page. That's right. I should have mentioned that.
And so, Gene, how can folks contact you? You're a lawyer in Toronto. I'm assuming you're open for families to contact you if for all their divorce needs.
Well, sure. If the case has an Ontario aspect, I mean, we get calls and emails from all over the world. Because when you go to my website, you see that in my firm, we care very much for families, but particularly for the situation of men who historically have gotten a very rough ride in the family law system. But so the children have to reside in Ontario. My website address is www.complexfamilylaw.com. And from the website, there's multiple ways of making contact with me.
Well, Gene, we certainly appreciate your time talking with us today and getting us informed a little bit about what's going on there in Canada. And we do wish you the best of luck up there in getting things to be a state where it's more fair for children and families. And we certainly appreciate all your work with that. And please do keep us informed about what's going on. And we'll look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you. I'm pleased to.